On a hot afternoon in Manila, a skinny, barefoot boy named Mateo stood on the corner of a bustling street, cradling a guitar so worn its paint had faded and strings looked ready to snap. The world rushed past him, jeepneys honking, vendors shouting, footsteps hurrying by, but Mateo sang as if no noise could touch him. His voice was soft, almost fragile, yet it held a strange, undeniable magic, the kind that made you stop mid-step without knowing why. He sang, Hotel California, not with polished technique, but with raw emotion, each word carrying pieces of his story, nights spent on a thin mat, mornings without breakfast, dreams too big for his small world. Most people barely glanced his way. Some tossed a coin without looking. But then, among the blur of strangers, a foreign tourist slowed down. Drawn by something in Mateo's voice, the tourist stopped and stood still, forgetting about his camera until instinct took over. He pressed record, focusing on the boy's face, the chipped guitar, and the way the melody seemed to rise above the chaos of the street. Mateo sang on, unaware of the lens, lost in the music that was the only thing that had ever made him feel seen. When the song ended, the tourist's eyes were glistening. He didn't just hear a song, he had witnessed a story, one that deserved to be told far beyond this street corner. Mateo, brushing hair from his forehead, didn't know it yet, but this chance encounter would soon change the course of his life forever. 2 weeks later, Mateo sat on the edge of his small bed in their one-room home, scrolling through an old phone his mother had been given by a neighbor. He spotted an email that seemed too unbelievable to be real, an official invitation to audition for a major international talent show in the United States. His first reaction was laughter, the kind that hides disbelief. How could a boy who played guitar on the streets possibly stand on a world stage? His mother, exhausted from her second shift at the laundry, shook her head gently. "We can't even afford the ticket, Anik," she said, her voice soft but certain. Mateo tried to push the thought away, but the seed had been planted. The next day, a message popped up from the same foreign tourist who had stopped to listen weeks earlier. The video he had recorded of Mateo's singing had gone viral, millions of views, thousands of comments, and people asking, "Who is this boy?" The tourist had set up a fundraiser, and donations from strangers around the world were pouring in. Messages of love and encouragement came from people in countries Mateo had never even heard of. When the tourist called to tell him they had raised enough for flights, hotel, and even clothes for the audition, Mateo felt his chest tighten. It wasn't just the money, it was the proof that people believed in him. For the first time, the dream didn't feel like an impossible fantasy. It felt like destiny knocking at his door. The bright stage lights were blinding as Mateo stepped into the spotlight, clutching the same battered guitar that had carried him through countless street corners. The studio was vast, the audience stretching into shadows, and in front of him sat 4 world-famous judges whose faces he had only ever seen on television. His palms were slick with sweat, his knees trembling beneath his jeans. A polite murmur of applause rippled through the crowd, but he could sense the quiet doubt in the room, just another shy kid with a guitar, they probably thought. He took a deep breath and began to strum the opening chords of Hotel California. At first, his voice was tentative, testing the air. But with each line, the fear melted away, replaced by something deeper. Memories of his father singing to him before he passed, nights when music drowned out the growl of his stomach, the hope that his mother would never have to work herself sick again. His voice cracked in places, but it was the kind of crack that made it real, that carried truth. By the second chorus, the entire room had fallen silent. The audience leaned in as if afraid to break the spell. One judge clasped her hands over her mouth, another closed his eyes, letting the raw emotion wash over him. Even the camera operator seemed to slow, capturing every trembling note. Mateo wasn't just performing, he was telling the world who he was, and for the first time in his life, the world was truly listening. When the final note faded, there was a heartbeat of silence, a stillness so complete Mateo could hear his own pulse thudding in his ears. Then, as if a dam had burst, the audience erupted in cheers. People rose to their feet, clapping, shouting his name. Mateo stood frozen, eyes wide, unsure if this was really happening. One of the judges, her hands trembling, leaned forward and whispered something to the others. Then, without warning, she slammed her palm down on the golden buzzer. In an instant, the stage exploded in a storm of gold confetti, shimmering under the lights like falling stars. Mateo's hands flew to his face, trying to hide the tears spilling over. The judges were on their feet now, clapping through misty eyes, while the host rushed over, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. From the corner of the stage, he spotted his mother, her hands pressed to her mouth, her cheeks wet, her body shaking with sobs. She wasn't just seeing her son succeed, she was watching every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt transform into something beautiful. The judge who had pressed the buzzer spoke into her microphone, her voice breaking. "You didn't just sing a song, you told us a story, and we felt every word." Mateo took a shaky breath, stepped forward, and whispered into the mic, "For my family, for my country, thank you." His voice cracked, but in that moment, it was the most powerful sound in the room. The days after the audition felt like a dream Mateo never wanted to wake from. His performance video spread across the internet like wildfire, shared by celebrities, replayed on news channels, and watched by millions around the world. Messages poured in from strangers telling him how his voice had made them cry, how his story had reminded them to believe in hope again. Donations continued to arrive, enough to lift his family out of poverty, and scholarships from prestigious schools offered him a chance at an education he had once thought impossible. In interviews, people often asked him how it felt to be famous, but Mateo would just smile and shake his head. "I'm not famous," he'd say softly. "I'm just a boy who got lucky enough to be heard." He carried himself the same way he always had. Still humble, still grateful, still clutching that old, battered guitar wherever he went. One evening, standing backstage before another performance, he told a reporter, "I thought I was singing for money. But I was really singing to tell the world, dreams don't belong to the rich. They belong to anyone brave enough to chase them." His smile, wide and unguarded, lit up his face like the first golden confetti falling from the ceiling that day. And somewhere in a small corner of Manila, a street lay a little quieter, as if it knew the boy who once played there had carried its heartbeat all the way to the world stage.